SB County Elections. Vote for your friends. Vote for your family. Vote for the ones you love. Vote for those before you and in the future. Vote for all those who gave their lives on the battlefields or on 9/11. Every vote counts. It's up to you. Not a paid political advertisement. Just vote.
This is KCAA.
Just like a rock star.
9:04 Pacific time, right here in North America. Your Music Team 2018 midterm election event. Tonight we're featuring DJ Hano in the event. Our special guest DJ Sprite. And tonight, our special guest Sheriff Stan Sniff, Riverside County Sheriff Coroner. I'm your host Fred Plumley. Unfortunately, David Marquez, Moreno Valley Mayor candidate, is sick. But we expect more guests tonight. Get ready. The party has just begun. Your Music Team, NBC Radio, KCAA, the new Hot 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking with my special guest, Sheriff Stan Sniff. This is your Music Team 2018 midterm election event. .06 Pacific time, right here in North America. Tonight we're featuring DJ Hano, live and in the mix. And of course my good friend, Sheriff Stan Sniff, Riverside County Sheriff and Coroner since 2007. It's going to be an exciting night tonight. All right, 9:07 Pacific time, and a special night tonight. 2018 midterm election event. I'm Fred Plumley, and my special guest tonight is Sheriff Stan Sniff, Riverside County Sheriff and Coroner. How you doing tonight, Stan?
Fred, I'm doing great.
All right. Well, it's really good to have you back on the program. And, you've been here quite a number of times, but it's great having you here.
I feel like a veteran. And you talk about the United States Army all the time anyway, so I feel right at home.
Well, it is true. You are a veteran. In fact, a colonel in the U.S. Army, right?
Retired, yes.
And, a lot of people were, happy or would have been happy to kind of stop there, but that you went on to have a great career in law enforcement. And now, of course, you're sheriff of the third largest sheriff's department in California.
Yeah, we shrank a little bit only due to all those terrible budget cuts that I've talked to you about. 2 of them back-to-back in 2 years, huge cuts that reduced kind of our employment force through attrition. But the good news, if you remember last time when I was with you, is we've got a little bit extra bounce on money. Thankfully, the Board of Supervisors helped us out a little bit, and the District Attorney in Riverside County, and we got a little bit of a bump to add some more staff. Take us a while, but we're on a good track.
Well, you've had a lot of cuts, but one thing that I know is that even so, with your great management skills, the crime rate continues to go down and down.
It is utterly amazing, and I talk about that nonstop with the public groups that I interface. Is the department is badly undermanned at this point, and so it's good that we are going to be growing some muscle mass back. But in spite of all those challenges that we've had over the last couple of years, the men and women of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, civilian, correctional deputies, sworn deputies, are just doing a tremendous job. And we did see the violent crime rate drop almost 9% for our FBI report card for 2017. So knock on wood, we'll continue to do a great job this year when it closes out in 2018, but it's really a tribute to the professionalism of the men and women of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department.
Yeah, definitely a great department. And, I remember a couple years ago that we had this major shooting here in San Bernardino, or at least I was out there 20 minutes after the event and reported on it for about 3 days afterwards. But you had a potential event like that, which your department prevented from even happening. So I want to mention that.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about the Norco event for the Riverside Community College, Norco College out in the west end of the county. Yeah, it was great work where they proactively got a threat and chased it down. In fact, several of those officers I've watched now get different community awards that were directly involved in that. Great tribute to the proactivity of the men and women of the Sheriff's Department. All of the listeners, I'm sure, hear a lot of pandering baloney that comes out from some of these political candidates trashing the department, basically making stuff up to see if it sticks. But the reality was, every single day, the men and women at all different ranks in the department are out proactive and using their initiative and throughout all our communities. A lot of really talented people.
Yeah, you definitely have a very talented department. In fact, we've had a number of your captains here on the program. I remember Leonard Purvis has been here a couple times.
Yep, and we've got some 24 captains in the department and some 90 lieutenants, and some really good ones. And most of them are pretty young and fairly inexperienced. It's a very young department. Almost half of the 4,000 members of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department were hired just in the last 11 years as I've been the sheriff. So it becomes a challenge because they're very bright and they are full of initiative, but they also, every once in a while, just make mistakes.
Outstanding. And, one thing I want to mention as well, I mean, there's a lot of people out here talking, like you said, and very unknowledgeable comments. But the truth is that, you really do a great job managing your department, and you have a lot of diversity, a lot of executives based on merit, like a lot of women in the department. I really commend you for that.
Yeah, diversity has been, and you've heard me speak to this a couple of times when I've been a guest on your show, but the diversity issues where we reflect more of the makeup of our communities that we serve has been very important to me for the last 11 years. And going along with that, and maybe your listeners will probably be a little bit surprised, but I've also pushed a lot of formal education. And I've got some Neanderthals, like every organization does, that basically don't want to comply with that, but the bulk of the department has, and it's really made a much stronger department from the standpoint of understanding how to communicate with the public, understanding critical thinking skills and that type of stuff. And we pay the men and women in these law enforcement agencies a lot of money, and we have very, 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 very high expectations of their performance every day. And they're dealing with some tremendous challenges that many of us that started in law enforcement, like I did back in the mid-'70s, really didn't have to face. And so that diversity has been a strength, the educational skills that the department has gained, and of course, near and dear to your heart, we also hire a lot of veterans, and I like having veterans, those that have served as, whether enlisted or non-commissioned officers or commissioned officers, and served overseas and been away from mom and dad's back bedroom. It adds a lot of maturity, and so we look for all those combinations that understand how to work with people. Really critical.
Well, you know, one thing I'm aware of, and one of my DJs is now a deputy sheriff in the Yucaipa County Sheriff's Department in Arizona, DJ Axon. But one thing I know that a lot of people want to serve in your department. I mean, everybody wants to serve in your department.
Yeah, unfortunately, for a while, we didn't have enough money to hire a lot of extra people. We continued, and your listeners probably watched all our advertisements and signs. We were busy still hiring when we were taking those budget cuts, but the reality was we didn't hire one for each of the replacements when they left the department, because we had to make the payroll shrink quite a bit to fit inside the budget box. But we always hired. That's now being expedited. So those of you among your listeners that know other great men and women out there in the community, part of your families or your circle of friends, they're looking for great jobs and a great future. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department has all those, because we're going to be expanding mightily over the next decade.
Very good. Well, you know, a question a lot of people have, you know, maybe you can explain exactly what a sheriff does, because some of the younger people are not sure. You know, they think it's maybe like what they see on the movies, and I know it's nothing like that. Maybe you can explain it a little bit for all our viewers and listeners.
Sure, I'd be happy to. There's really three main functions that a sheriff in California is required to do in each of the 58 counties, and the sheriff is elected by the public on the same cycle the governor's on. And what those three areas are as a minimum, very different from the police chiefs that we serve alongside, is we have a massive patrol function where we take care of dealing with crimes in the unincorporated area. That's that area that's outside city jurisdictions. In Riverside County's case, we have 28 separate cities, so across 7,300 square miles, a landmass about the size of the state of New Jersey. And of the 2.4 million that make up our county, 400,000 live outside those city limits, mountaintops, remote desert areas. So our job is to respond to calls from the public out in those areas. And then I'm also responsible for running and managing a jail system that serves not only the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, but every police agency, every law enforcement agency that makes an arrest inside of Riverside County for state violations, like the Highway Patrol, and certainly the city police departments and the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. All of them book into that county jail. And so that becomes critical for our operations to do that. Police departments don't have to do that. The third area that I mentioned was that I'm also responsible for securing all the courtrooms across Riverside County and doing the civil service. So a deputy sheriff can be assigned, just like we do in the military. We call them MOSs in the military, but they can be assigned to any of those three critical areas. Our county has one additional one that most of the counties in California. I'm also the coroner public administrator. So I have specialized staff that work in that area too. So a lot of moving parts, Fred. Very complex to run, very much more challenging than a city police department, even a large one. Even our next largest agency, Riverside Police Department in our county, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department is about 10 times the size of that police department.
Very good information, and I know people are really learning a lot about this. Well, let's talk about your county, because it's huge, big area.
Well, and we've talked about this too, but I think a lot of people even living inside of Riverside County are unaware that our county has had explosive population growth for the decades I've been with the Sheriff's Department. And so within the state of California, we are the fourth largest in land mass at 7,300 square miles. And at 2.4 million, as I indicated, it's also the fourth largest in population. There's projections that show that we'll go up to number 3 and number 2 inside of California on population. But the real stunner was a couple years ago when we eclipsed San Bernardino County in population and became the 10th most populous county anywhere in the United States. And so part of our challenges that we deal with in law enforcement in my area and the other folks that provide government services over something the size of the state of New Jersey is it's darn tough. And when you get a lot of growth, jails, infrastructure, parks, lights, streets, all that stuff lags behind.
Well, you know, that's very outstanding. I didn't know that. So the 10th most populous county in the United
States. That's right.
Wow. I learned something tonight
and I grew up in this county, and the reality was, I tell you, for your listeners, how fast and what translates into really great job opportunities with our department and the other county departments. But when I came in from a police department into the sheriff's office, that was 1979. Their population of Riverside County was 600,000, lock, stock, and barrel. And I just got through telling you a couple times, today it is 2.4 million and still growing.
You know, incredible. And obviously, it's imperative to have a professional like yourself who really can run a department and keep things working like you have.
Well, I appreciate that, and certainly there's a couple of us that have been around for quite a while, and we could have retired quite a while back, but dealing with all the fiscal challenges and some of the challenges that we've talked before on as a guest on California's criminal justice system, it's been quite a challenge. And so we've got some great men and women. I don't intend to die in office. So there's some great ones that'll be able to replace me, and at a certain point, if I can just give them enough opportunity to grow under our umbrella, and then take the department up to unheralded heights into the future.
Well, you know, you certainly have a vision for the future, and an incredible resume too. You know, a lot of people do not know that you were in the U.S. Army for 30 years, I believe, and you were a colonel in the Army, and that kind of background, that's even before you got into law enforcement, so very outstanding.
Yeah, my active duty was before I got into law enforcement, and then I stayed, like probably many of your listeners, and certainly these days, I stayed in the reserve components for the rest of that time, and pretty much, interestingly enough, I was not in law enforcement-related military MOSs. I was always in infantry, armor, or cavalry units. I was in primarily combat arms units because I like to shoot the big guns, and so there's nothing more fun than shooting a tank gun or watching back when we had Cobra attack helicopters doing their gun runs or running on the gun seat, on the front seat of those. A lot of great men and women I served with. Some of them were on active duty, even in the reserves, and I got to interface and go through all the military schooling systems and so on, which for anybody that served in the military knows they're head and shoulders above a lot of the civilian training that you get an opportunity to go to, even in law enforcement for that matter. So I've been very gifted. I had great opportunities and great assignments, and remember a lot of great people that I've worked along with, just probably like many of your listeners that have served. You have a lot of great friends, and you network for life, and you share a lot of common experiences against usually a common peril. So it binds you very close together, like the Band of Brothers series.
Very good, and of course, our principal sponsor is the U.S. Army, and very proud of them, and just incredible experience. Well, you know what, Stan? I think we're going to have DJ Hano play a couple songs and then get back to talking with you more about the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and the upcoming campaign and election. Great.
Happy to do it.
All right, we've got DJ Hano live and in the mix.
You've had a dose of a freaky ghost. Let me tell you something. you said you wouldn't do. You're praying I don't find somebody new. I'm trying, but I can't help it, can't help it. I don't want your love no more. No more, no more, no more. It's not what I'm looking for. I don't want your love. If you can't be the one I want, can't help it. I don't want your love no more. No more, no more, no more. It's not what I'm looking for. I don't want your love no more. If you can't be the one I want, baby, I'm gone for love no more. No more, no more. No more. No more, no. I don't want your love no more. No more, no more. No more. Can't help it. Say it ain't so. I believed you were my angel. Now you're dancing with the devil. It ain't adding up. Think I had enough. Enough. I could see through you. You did everything you said you wouldn't do. You're praying I don't find somebody new. I'm trying, but I can't help it, can't help it. I don't want your love no more. No more, no more, no more. It's not what I'm looking for. I don't want your love. If you can't be the one I want, can't help it. I don't want your love no more. Yeah, it's not what I'm looking for. I don't want your love no more. If you can't be the one I want, baby, I'm gone for love no more. No more, no more. No more. No more, no. I don't want your love no more. No more, no more. No more. Can't help it. I don't want your
9:28, we'd like to thank our principal sponsor, the U.S. Army. The United States Army is a key component of the U.S. Armed Forces, made up of the best trained, most dedicated, most respected soldiers in the world, protecting Americans' freedoms at home and abroad, securing our homeland, and defending democracy worldwide. With expert training of one of over 150 different jobs for soldiers on active duty and over 120 in the Army Reserve, there's no limit to the opportunities in the Army. From the arts to the sciences, intelligence to combat, computers to helicopters, engineering to law, there's no limit to what you can learn and achieve. Join the team that makes a difference, the U.S. Army. www.goarmy.com. .929 right here in North America. I'm Fred Plumley, DJ Hano, live and in the mix. Your music team 2018 midterm election event. My special guest tonight is Sheriff Stan Smith, Riverside County Sheriff Coroner. How you doing, Stan?
Doing great. Fun to be with you guys again.
You know, it's always great to have you here on the program, and definitely look forward to having you back when you are re-elected as Sheriff of Riverside County. And you've been Sheriff since 2007, right?
Right, 11 years.
And we definitely need to continue to have you in office protecting Riverside County. You do a great job.
Thanks, Fred. It's really a tribute to all the great people that help lead the department and manage it in its day-to-day operations. But I'm proud to carry the colors of the organization out into the community and talk about some of the great issues of the day. Like, as you know, I pretty much do nonstop. What is interesting probably in the history of our department, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, I'm probably the most traveled and accessible, and I'm traveled within Riverside County, but accessible sheriff that there's been. And now I've logged some 400,000 plus miles just in the last 11 years. And the staff think it's funny because I'm really never in the office. I'm always out in the community. And that's who our agency serves. In one way or another, we help the quality of life for all 2.4 million that live in Riverside County. Even if they've got their own great police department, they each and every one of them that live in Riverside County depend on the quality of the men and women of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department in one form or another.
Well, you know, it's outstanding, and I want to concur because I do a lot of events, and every time I do, you're out there, and without fail. So you're always out there. In fact, I think, weren't you just at a big event in Palm Springs, like a parade, and you're everywhere?
Yeah, annually they have the Palm Springs Pride Parade, and that was today out in Palm Springs. It started this morning, or I think they stepped off about 10 o'clock or thereabouts. But thousands and thousands of people. It was just a gigantic parade. And, of course, we had our recruiting booths out there and just a lot of fun people that we got an opportunity to interface with. And, again, we weren't the only agency. Los Angeles Police Department were there with us side by side. And the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department for the first time was there en masse. But the Riverside County Sheriff's Department always has had traditionally a role in each of these community events, and we were very much wired in. And they've got a great local police department. The Palm Springs Police Department is an excellent agency, but it's kind of fun for the sheriff's office to go in and bring some of the toys that we have, helicopters and bomb gear stuff. That our canines, I've got almost 30 dogs at this point. In fact, one of the canine trials were on yesterday in Norco, and I got to see a Windy, our bloodhound that is used in tracking. And Fred, what was fascinating is that dog, and that's not a regular patrol dog, that's one that we use for searches for young kids and anything else where they can use a scent to follow a trail. That dog has been so busy. She's been on 21 calls just last month all over this county. So she's one heck of an asset that we end up utilizing for allied agencies as well. In fact, one of a homicide that they were on out in the western Riverside County the other day, the handler, Robert Ochoa, told me that that dog picked up the scent of a human being off an unexpended .556 cartridge, standard military rifle cartridge, unfired, was laying on the ground, and they tracked the suspect down off the scent of one cartridge laying on the ground. Unbelievable.
Wow, that's remarkable, and obviously, you've got a great canine unit. And by the way, mentioning all the events you do, a good friend of mine, Commissioner James Baker, he's been on the show many times too, and he was saying hello to you and a lot of people out in Moreno Valley watching this show and watching you here on your music team, NBC Radio, KCAA.
He's a mainstay of Moreno Valley, a great guy, as you know, Fred. I've known him for quite a while. And what your listeners may not know, and I do end up participating in some of the shooting sports in my off time when I do have extra time, but I also dress up as part of that in what we call Single Action Shooting Society, where you wear Old West clothing. And he had set up a float on July 4th out in Moreno Valley, and I dressed the part, minus the mustache, of the Wyatt Earp thing with a black frock coat and the sombrero-like hat on that and the six-shooters and all that stuff. And that darn float got an award, got an outstanding award, like the best award out of the city of Moreno Valley. And there were some other folks wearing period clothing there too, but it was just a hoot. And he put that together.
Yeah, it was great. In fact, you're right. It was the #1 float in the parade. And by the way, we had a parade too, a float too, a parade too. I'm sorry. I'm kind of recovering from a cold and flu, but we were in the parade a couple floats behind you. And we had the Mummy float, and we were out there playing the music. In fact, DJ Hano was mixing live out there for that event, and we were rocking the house a few floats behind you. So,
well, it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. And I got an invite from Mr. Baker, and it was really a lot of fun. And of course, all these parades are great fun in each of our communities, and I try to participate as much as I can. In fact, just this weekend, in addition to the parade today out in Palm Springs, Saturday morning I was on a Veterans Day parade, a little bit earlier than Veterans Day, but over in the city of Paris. Great fun and a great community, and it's all part of being a public official and being accessible out there to the community and waving at all the young kids that are looking at you in uniform and dreaming about what they're going to do someday, and whether their gender, ethnic background, sexual orientation. Our department and most law enforcement agencies that are modern right now really try to more and more reflect and do our promotions based on merit. It's a sea change from what it was when I first went into law enforcement back in the mid-'70s.
Well, let's talk about that. First of all, you really pride yourself on being accessible, and I know you are. You're out there everywhere. A lot of people are not, but I really commend you because you must get tired.
I get very tired. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but I still have a tremendous amount of energy and that sense of duty that, again, I learned in the armed forces. Different generation, perhaps, but giving back to the community and also doing the best you possibly can. Even though I appreciate the comment about being accessible to everybody, the reality is there's more draws on my. As you know, I'm not very big. I'm not nearly as big as you are. And so I'm not a really large person, but there's a tremendous amount of draw across Riverside County to get a piece of me to come out and visit with them. And we really try to do the best we can to sprinkle myself out there, but it's awful challenging. It's challenging inside a huge agency as well. And so we try to meet everybody's expectation, but unfortunately we don't make everybody happy, I guess. I try.
Well, you do a great job. And I want to say this, that I know a lot of people out there, a lot of the business community, and they love you out there. So I think you're doing a great job. I commend you very much.
I appreciate that. We try to do a good job. And like I said, the biggest thing that I can do is basically unharness the men and women that are in the management positions to react to threats and opportunities in each of their communities and not have to operate lockstep. There are certain policy issues because obviously the high liability items that we've got to deal with, and there's legal issues that get us into trouble if we're not careful on that. But we really try to push the men and women in the department to empower them at the lowest possible levels within the purviews of the law. They don't get to make up law or pick and choose, and so they've got to be cognizant of what the law is and what the procedures are of the department. But we really encourage them to be very proactive. I hear a lot of nonsense out there, the same thing your listeners probably do when people are running election time trying to pander for votes, making stuff up. But the reality is the Riverside County Sheriff's Department does a great job on proactivity. It's been harmed a little bit by the budget cutbacks, but the board has been good to the Sheriff's Office and the DA about getting that stuff turned around. And so the men and women are doing a really, really good job on that. And that makes my heart feel really good, because when you see them do things that connect in the papers, good deeds, and it could be a humanitarian issue, it could be solving a crime like you've talked about before. It is really good to see them connect the dots on that stuff, and I'm very proud of them. The other night I had just as an aside, we were in Temecula on Friday night, and the trauma intervention program that has volunteers that come out to key traumatic incidents for all law enforcement agencies, not just mine. But it was fascinating at the dinner, and several of the people there from community leaders were leaned over to me and said, "My gosh, all your deputies and sergeants are occupying all these awards for being proactive and using a lot of initiative and doing all the great community policing things that we expect of law enforcement agencies. You must be really proud." And I said, I am. And it begs the issue when you hear all this political nonsense about a department in crisis, because it's been challenged, certainly, but it's not in crisis. And the men and women prove it every single day. That particular night, almost all the awards for Southwest Riverside County, some of them went to CHP, some of them went to some of the firefighting agencies, some of them went to Marietta Police Department. The lion's share of them all went to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. It was amazing.
Well, congratulations on that. And another issue I want to bring up is, I love your management style because you know, you have all these people in the department, and you really have a lot of diversity, a lot of women, a lot of people with different lifestyles based on merit, I believe, the people that could do the job the best, just like in the Army.
Well, and that's true. And the Army is, and the other military branches have been really good as far as being much more reflective of all the communities we serve, and doing promotions on merit. And I'll say, as an underscore in this, when I took office within 2 weeks, the first woman to hold the rank of undersheriff, which is number 2 in one of our largest California law enforcement agencies, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, I appointed that woman to that position. Very well qualified, Valerie Hill, and that was followed by another woman. But even more interestingly, I talk a lot to the public about, to your listeners that happen to be women are interested in law enforcement, don't think that's a job for them. That's baloney, because women have made a tremendous contribution. When I first went into law enforcement in the mid-'70s, there was hardly any women in law enforcement, and so they've been relatively new to the law enforcement profession, but they've actually made each of our agencies a better agency, because I'll tell you what we see is women have the ability to communicate much faster and better than men do. And that has helped professionalize our agency and the other allied agencies by having women increasingly in our ranks, all the way up through the highest levels in the department. But it's really been a fascinating journey I've had just in my career on how much law enforcement has changed. The men and women working on the streets in my agency and the other agencies, they face challenges that when I was on the street as a young man in my 20s, first going into law enforcement, working on a city police department, we never had to face. It's always been dangerous, so that part's always there, but it's much more complex to be a law enforcement officer these days. And thankfully, a lot of them are coming into the department with college degrees and advanced education and military experience, and that's been a godsend to all of us. But women have played a critical role in making all our law enforcement profession much more professional.
You know, it's outstanding. And another thing that a lot of people don't know is you have one of the best law enforcement training facilities in the state.
Right. The Ben Clark Training Center, which is located in western Riverside County, off Van Buren. Most of your listeners, if they're familiar with the Riverside National Cemetery off Van Buren, near the 215, they'll see that the old Ben Clark Training Center was actually where the 15th Air Force headquarters used to be when March Air Force Base had a much bigger footprint and was an active base. And they gave us a couple decades ago, the federal government did, for $1 forever, as long as we use it for joint police, fire, and paramedic training, 375 acres. And so that site does entry-level firefighting, paramedic, and more importantly to me, basic law enforcement. The 6-month basic academy is conducted there 4 times a year with Riverside Community College District. And even more critically, we do advanced training there. The Highway Patrol uses that site for their advanced training, so they don't have to ship people that in service training all the way up to Sacramento, where their academy footprint is pretty small and they get backlogged. And so it is a very busy site, but it is only one of 39 post-approved training centers anywhere in California. So that training center in our backyard of Riverside turns out police officers, deputy sheriffs, not only for the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, but Mono, Inyo, and Imperial County, much smaller sheriff's offices, and police departments within this county and outside of Riverside County all get their training, basic and their advanced training at that site. Great facility.
Outstanding. And, you know, another thing, while we're mentioning all these great things that you're doing, let's see if I'm right. I think that you do policing in 17 of the 28 cities located in Riverside County, and including Moreno Valley, where I live.
That's right. Legally, as I said at the outset, the sheriff is only bound by law to end up enforcing criminal investigations and criminal law in the unincorporated areas outside those 28 cities that make up Riverside County. And what's interesting is we have expanded our patrol function because cities, instead of having their own police department, can hire the sheriff's department. We don't do it at a profit, so it's all cost neutral to us, extremely cost effective. And so today there are 17, the majority of the cities actually contract with the sheriff's department for deputies that become their city police department. The managers, the dispatchers, all the pieces of what a law enforcement agency would look like, big or small. And Moreno Valley, as you mentioned, is the second largest city in Riverside County. Very, very cost effective. And the men and women of the department do a great job. When there's an emergency and our helicopters come in, or bomb, or SWAT guys, or K9, it's all done under one uniform chain of command without a lot of other different uniforms in there or communication issues on it. So it works very smoothly. So there's about roughly 1 million people that are dealt with in our 17 cities. Another 400,000, like I said at the outset, in the unincorporated area. So the Sheriff's Department patrol function right now deals with 1.4 million of the 2.4 million that make up Riverside County, roughly 2/3. So it's quite a footprint just in our patrol. Not talking about jails, not talking about courts, or not talking about coroner, just patrol operations.
Yeah, what a complex operation, and you have great, departments too. Like I know David Kurlowitz, so he's the chief of police of Moreno Valley, but he's actually a captain in your department, right?
That's right. And so the cities have a role on selecting who their police chief's going to be, because it's very reflective of their values. And quite literally, each of the cities can, if they want to stack a deputy in every street corner, and they can pay for it. Obviously, we don't get a profit, but it is darn expensive on public safety. And we do have some cities that staff enormously high ratios to the population, but they have a lot of money. And some of them have a lot of crime, some of them don't have so much. But every city varies a little bit, but we can custom tailor a menu of options to serve whatever their needs or their budget is. It works really, really smoothly, and it's far more cost effective than having their own agency.
Well, your department has done incredible work, and as I said again, the crime rate continues to go down. Really want to commend you for that, Sheriff Stan Sniff.
Well, knock on wood, because it's a challenge in California on dealing with anything in the criminal justice system. We live in kind of an era what's awful tough with inadequate space in prisons and jails, more laws that we seem to see getting passed every single year to criminalize things that didn't used to be criminalized. And we're also seeing a lot of things that are being decriminalized, obviously. And starting with realignment, we've seen a sea change. And that's why one of the neat things our county is going to be doing is they're finishing a massive new jail that we desperately needed for quite some time out in Indio. And for your listeners, why that's of interest to them is that's going to create a lot of jobs, over 400 new hires that I have to have just to operate that new jail out in Indio that'll be ready next spring. And that's civilian positions of all different types, correctional deputy, and also sworn deputy, the ones that go through the 6-month basic academy. We're going to need a lot of great men and women to join the department, and a lot of people will have opportunities to get promoted for more rank and authority and responsibility, and more money, obviously.
All right, well, sounds like a lot of outstanding career opportunities coming up. And great talking with you, Sheriff Stan Sniff. I think we're going to play a few songs with DJ Hano in the mix, and then get back to you with some more questions about the campaign and the upcoming election. An exciting night. This is your Music Team 2018 midterm election event.
Standing with a bottle of red wine ready to pour, dressed in long black satin and lace to the floor. So many them sat down, started kissing, caressing, told me about jacuzzi, sounded interesting. So we jumped right in, all calls diverted to answer phone. Please leave a message after the tone. Me and our parents were kinda cool, but they ran a fine line between me and you. Saying, why were you creeping around late last night? Why did I see two shadows moving in your bedroom? Like dressed in black when I left with red. standing with the keys in my hand to the 4x4. Checking my ride, checking that nobody saw. We got down, bounce to the rhythm. So it was early morning, thought we better be leaving. So I gave you my jacket for you to hold. Told you to wear it 'cause you felt cold. I mean, me and I didn't mean to break the rules. I won't try to play and I'm in bed for fools. You are just doing things young people in love do. Parents trying to find out what we were up to. Saying, why can't you keep your promises? No more saying you'll be home by 12. I'm strolling in at 4. I'm with the girls, believe me, with the boy next door. Can you feel me? Yeah. Wearing a jacket through poverty. Said you'd be cute before it's happy, but you left all your money on TV. Can you feel me? Yeah. Saying why were you leaving around late last night? Why did I see two shadows moving in your bedroom light? Now you're dressed in black, but I left you dressed in white. Can you feel me? Yeah. Calls diverted to answer phone. Bed by the bottle, have the contents gone. When I returned, jacuzzi turned on. Can you feel me? Yeah.
You are live in the mix with DJ Hano.
All right, DJ Hano live and in the mix. Your music team, NBC. $9.53. Want to mention a new sponsor, United Furniture, located at 13373 Paris Boulevard in Moreno Valley, California. You know, they really have great furniture there and exceed expectations. Customer service is key. So I encourage people to meet with Hubert Gutierrez and the team at United Furniture. Their website, www.unitedfurniture1.com. Definitely exceeding expectations. Lots of great furniture located in Moreno Valley on Paris Boulevard at 13373 Paris Boulevard in Moreno Valley, California.
Not too long ago, I was dancing for dollars. No, it's really real if I let you be my mama. You don't want a girl like me, I'm too crazy. But every other girl you meet is too gazy. I'm sure them other girls were nice enough, but you need someone to spice it up. So who you gonna call? Cardi, Cardi. Come and rev it up like a Harley, Harley. Why is the best food always forbidden? I'm coming to you now doing 20 over the limit. The red light, stop. I don't play when it comes to my heart, let's get it though. I don't really want a white horse in a carriage. I'm thinking more white horses and carriage. I need you right here, cause every time you fall, I play with this kitty like you play with your guitar.
see in the dark. With rockets pointed up at the stars. We are billions of beautiful hearts.
9:57 Pacific time. Want to mention another great sponsor, the Shark Nightclub in Moreno Valley at the corner of Paris and Sunnymead Boulevard in Moreno Valley. Something great is always happening at the Shark Nightclub, where the action is in the Inland Empire. We're the largest crowds of any nightclub in the Inland Empire. Friday and Saturday night, the Shark Nightclub, right off the 60 freeway at Paris and Sunnymead. Check it out. In fact, we're out at the Shark Nightclub a few nights a week. Normally, we're there every night after this show. The Shark Nightclub in Moreno Valley. Check it out. DJ Hano live and in the mix.
We are problems that want to be solved. We are children that need to be loved. We were willing, we came when you called. But man, you fooled us, enough is enough.
$9.59, DJ Hano rocking the house tonight.
You're live in the mix with DJ Hano.
By the way, for those who don't know, DJ Hano is one of California's premier DJs, resident DJ at El Torito, San Bernardino, and he performs at many nightclubs like Sevilla Nightclub, Hito C, Avalon Hollywood, 909 Sports Lounge, Rancho Cucamonga, Flyway Pomona, Agaves Long Beach, Sharky's Huntington Beach, Union Nightclub, Goddess Downey, and numerous special events. It's DJ Hano live and in the mix. Good evening. You're listening to the new Hot 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. KCAA, Loma Linda, Redlands, San Bernardino, Riverside, Moreno Valley, serving all of Southern California and the world at www.kcaaradio.com. This is your Music Team 2018 midterm election event. featuring DJ Hano in the mix. I'm your host, Fred Plumley. Tonight, my special guest is Sheriff Stan Sniff, Riverside County Sheriff at Coroner. We'll be talking with him in just a couple minutes. DJ Hano live and in the mix. All right, we'd like to thank our sponsor, David Marquez, for Moreno Valley Mayor 2018. David Marquez currently serves as Moreno Valley City Council member representing District 3. David Marquez has long been an active volunteer with the City of Moreno Valley, long-term resident for over 30 years, participating in and coordinating neighborhood cleanups since 2004. And David Marquez serves on many organizations such as the Salvation Army, Community Now, and veterans organizations including the VFW American Legion, also the Library and Traffic Safety Commissions, the Public Safety and Finance Subcommittees, and he's on the board of the Riverside County Habitat Conservation Agency, Riverside Transit Agency, Senior Citizens Board, Utilities Commission, and the League of California Cities Public Safety Policy Committee. David Marquez served in the United States Air Force for 7.5 years, touring throughout Southeast Asia, and then stationed in the United States. David Marquez also served with distinction as a police officer, and he graduated from Rio Hondo College in Whittier with a degree in police science and administration of justice. Proudly, all of Council Member Marquez's 4 children and 11 grandchildren attended or are attending schools in the Moreno Valley Unified School District. Vote for experience, vote for real leadership. Vote for David Marquez for Moreno Valley Mayor 2018. 10:04 Pacific Time, your music team, NBC. The party's right here every Sunday, 9 to 11 p.m. Pacific Time in North America. Okay. 10:04, your music team, 2018 midterm election event. I'm Fred Plumley. Tonight, my special guest, Sheriff Stan Sniff, Riverside County Sheriff at Coroner. Well, Stan, you've been here a few times. It's great having you back as special guest.
It's always fun to be with you guys.
All right, and I think it's a good time to talk about the campaign, and this has been an exciting campaign, I guess, huh?
Not so much. Mostly a toxic campaign full of hate and revenge and just terrible stuff said about individuals out in the community and inside the department, about me, which I'm always fair game, obviously. But it's been a very toxic campaign, and it's not been a pleasant one at all. It's part of what we all have to do when we're in public life, but it's unfortunate a lot of innocent people in this particular campaign have been victimized by really some obnoxious people campaigning.
Well, that's true. They've attacked me a little bit, too, for supporting you, but I guess that's what's been going on. It is what it is, huh?
It is what it is. That's an old saying that I use an awful lot.
But anyway, let's talk about the issues because they're really important. First of all, you have a myriad of experience in law enforcement, from being an officer in the Army. Your experience is... you're one of the most experienced people in the United States.
Well, I often liken it to an issue of if your listeners can visualize how complex flying a 747 is, and the Sheriff's Department, like I outlined earlier, is an extremely complex agency. It's one of the most complex, far more complex than, of course, the police departments that we serve alongside. $700 million a year in taxpayer dollars go, so there's a lot at stake, particularly if you overrun budgets or don't have good management sense. It takes a while, like I mentioned earlier, too, to raise the senior leaders that come up through the executive ranks that have experience in budgeting and the public policy issues. So our department is doing very well right now, but unfortunately the campaign stuff has harmed a lot of people inside and outside. I'd say that the key characteristics that you're looking for when you're talking about flying something as complex as 747 is. Talking about somebody that's unqualified is like putting them into the pilot seat when they never piloted, been a co-pilot, never even been in the back seat of the cockpit, or even in a flight simulator. It just doesn't make any sense. So in this case, the contrast is pretty stark. It's somebody that's ultimately qualified and has a track record and has the expertise, including the support of the majority of the council members and other regional leaders and mayors all across this county, and certainly a majority of the Board of Supervisors that actually do the funding for the Sheriff's Department and the other county departments. So there's a lot of confidence in that. But what we're facing is an enormous amount of special interest money by a handful of people, in essence, to end up dictating policy, public safety policy, which should be at the behest of the public we serve and not special interest groups like that. And so that's been a tough one because almost 1.5 million, which is unheard of in a Riverside County Sheriff's race, 1.5 million plus been dumped into this, basically to end up taking over the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and then ultimately taking over the county by a handful of individuals. I raise a lot of money, as you know, Fred. I have a lot of wealthy people and a lot of poor people, everything in between, hundreds, with broad-based support all across the county. And so I raise a lot of money, but when you can take a pickup truck and back it up to an oil tanker and just open the spigot, that really doesn't demonstrate a lot of support from across the county on it, particularly when the individual is completely unqualified and at this point isn't qualified to even command a station like Moreno Valley or jail or any of our court security elements at all, or coroner's operation, and just being thrust by a lot of money. Makes it difficult, but it is part of our elective process on that. But your listeners ought to understand that starkly this campaign for sheriff in Riverside County is between somebody that's ultimately qualified with a track record, has the education and experience to do it, and we've been doing a good job, as I've said over and over, versus somebody that has no background, no experience, and no track record.
Well, that's true. First of all, of course, you're a retired Army colonel with 30 years of distinguished service. And I know also that you not only did that, but you graduated from UC Riverside. You also have a master's degree from the University of Redlands, and you graduated from the FBI National Executive Institute.
That's right, and a host of other things like the Army's Command and General Staff College and the Post-Executive Development Program that's a precursor for ended up being a police chief in anywhere in the state, in California. That's one of the requirements. And so all those credentials are utterly lacking in my opponent. So the reality is that, as I mentioned earlier, it's really about somebody that's qualified and has the experience versus somebody that's completely unqualified.
Well, let's talk about that. I'm not going to mention your opponent by name, but he's a lieutenant. And, people might think a lieutenant is a big post, but it's not really in your department.
No, it's an important one, but it's one of our middle managers. But in our department, there are roughly 90 lieutenants. This individual has been a lieutenant for a long time without being promoted for obvious reasons. And they don't have anything to do with politics, like he says. They have to do with core competency. A lot of good people that the department can pick from. But there's lieutenants all work for captains, and there's 24 captains in the department, and probably a dozen executives over that. And those folks, the captains on up, are really vested with the more senior leadership positions in the department and help set policy. And then the executives that I mentioned, the dozen of them, they really do the interface on budget and interface with county government, allied agencies, and the rest of it. So there's no lieutenant that operates at that level or has any experience, in particular this one. And nor does this individual have any military background in any capacity whatsoever. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is really a campaign of revenge, and that's all comes with the territory. So nobody needs to feel sorry for sheriff. That's all part of how our government operates on that. But they shouldn't be under any illusion that this individual has any capability or qualities to run something as complex as I mentioned, let's like a 747.
Well, from what I understand, he doesn't even have any educational background, right?
Well, I think he recently, a couple years ago, at way late in age, finally went back and procured very quickly one of the educational things for a bachelor's degree. But he has no. Many of your listeners out there also have college degrees, many of them 4-year college degrees, and of course many of them have graduate degrees and operate like professionals in that arena. And they may have some other professional style in law enforcement or some other specialized areas. And so most of us don't have a lot of sympathy for people that won't have the discipline and stuff to do what they need to do to make themselves competitive and want it handed to them.
Well, let's talk about this too, because I know that you have strong support all over the county and all over the state, all over the country, actually. But, you've been endorsed by the NRA, California Rifle and Pistol Association, United Gun Owners of California. Riverside Press Enterprise has strongly endorsed you. So has the Desert Sun. Every professional top-level law enforcement official in the state of California.
Yeah, currently the police chiefs that are on active duty as serving as police chiefs in the county since the election of 2014 have really declined to want to get involved politically in anything. And so it's not unusual, although it gets pandered a lot, that police chiefs they're not supporting anybody, although several of them have really been concerned about the truthfulness of this opponent that we're not talking or mentioning his name on. But the reality is I have scores and scores of all sorts of retired executives that from inside the county all the way to the Los Angeles police chief that's retired, and many folks from all different size agencies that have known of me coming up through the ranks, and certainly as I've performed as sheriff, in addition to the majority of the county board of supervisors, which are very up close and personal with all of us running county departments, and many mayors and council members. The lion's share of all our regional leaders have been endorsers of mine and strong supporters, and that's usually a pretty good indicator of people that they have a lot of trust in, particularly with the amount of money and the impact you're going to have, as you mentioned, on the city of Moreno Valley and the other cities that we end up policing. And so that I take that very humbly. Obviously, there are no guarantees in life on success and so on, but those are pretty good barometers of the competency of my administration and what we've done so far with the great leaders working with me and around me in our department.
Well, congratulations. Of course, you've developed an incredible team and done a great job. Now, the other thing is you mentioned earlier, and I know you have incredibly strong community support, and there's been a lot of money put into the campaign, but you have broad support, whereas your opponent, pretty much all the money is coming from one source, right?
Yeah, almost $1 million from one source. One particular special interest group's leaders, not even the members of that organization, and there's a couple other large ones. So about 90% has come from very small special interests. Unfortunately, that's an enormous amount of money, and so it causes many of us in the public arena to wear a lot of vomit because you can buy a lot of ads and push that, even though you really don't have much of any competence to end up saying. The other comment that you made on the gun groups, and you've heard me talk before, and your listeners have too, I'm a pretty strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I've been a recreational shooter. I don't hunt, but I'm a recreational shooter for decades now in Riverside County, particularly as the county got more urbanized. But I've kept those roots, whether it's trap shooting or cowboy action shooting, if any of your listeners are familiar with that. But I enjoy the shooting sports when I get time. So I'm very humbled by the support of the NRA and certainly California Rifle and Pistol Association. And your listeners may not know that those are actually, even though they're perceived sometimes in the press as being pretty radical, they're not. They're actually pretty moderate. And I don't agree all the time with their posture, but I've been honored to have their support. And the reason I mention that is we've had a series of stories out in the Coachella Valley about a radical gun group, because there are some extremely radical gun groups that I clash with quite publicly, particularly on carry concealed weapons permits and things like that. And our department and I personally have had a very moderate posture. We support the issuance of carry concealed weapons permits to good law-abiding citizens, which in most cases is very easy to qualify. But I'll be darned if I'm going to end up giving out gun permits like popcorn on a street corner and pandering for votes. And that's kind of what I keep hearing from some of this nonsense. But I'll underscore to your listeners that contrary to the NRA and California Rifle and Pistol Association, there is extremely radical gun groups that I don't support, I don't work with, that have a different agenda, and they're way too radical on the gun issues. And I don't support giving people firearms that are going to be hidden on their body, going in the public arena, putting other people at risk, that just because they're going to hand them out like popcorn on a street corner. That's ridiculous public policy. So I hope most of your listeners understand that even though I'm supported by some of the more moderate gun groups and so on, we do support the Second Amendment. I'm really quite moderate, and that's very different from some of the folks that really are representative of more of the Tea Party extreme right wing, and including in the gun world on that. And some of those folks I have no use for whatsoever, because I think they're pandering to things and a lot of fears that I'm sure your listeners listen to in society. So a lot of people right now that are frightened, and sometimes people get pushed and those buttons pushed on frightening and making bad decisions instead of looking at everybody as a unique individual and a human being with the prejudices and bigotry and the rest of that stuff. So I hope everybody understands that it's important to end up supporting these things, but you can do that with a moderate course of action.
Well, you know, I really commend you because you're an incredible executive and manager, and I know that you've always been a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, but your main goal is to keep your citizens safe and protect Riverside County. And I also know that your opponent, although he is well-spoken at times, is actually a Tea Party extremist, and he's very conservative.
Yeah, he's panders to a lot of different groups, and that unfortunately, those of you that have served in the military, you learn to speak the truth and have a better sense on that stuff. But I don't like, I've never enjoyed people that talk out of both sides of their mouths, and I'm sure most of your listeners don't like that nonsense either. But it's pretty easy to add things up when you put all those different things that you're pandering to each of the specific groups put together. And unfortunately, my opponent has kind of wandered into that the last couple of months.
Well, you know, your opponent is famous for saying a lot of things that don't make sense. One of those, you know, is criticizing you as far as the Second Amendment when you have incredibly strong support from every major gun organization of any substance there is.
Yeah. I've, like you said, and I mentioned earlier, I've got great support from those that are a little bit more moderate and use good sense. And none of us always agree on that stuff, but there are, again, I'll remind you, there are some of these gun groups that are way, way too extreme. And I don't support any of that, and I don't listen to those folks. And I would encourage your listeners to be careful of what they're listening to, too, because there's just it's a strange time in our country right now where there's just a lot of antagonism and cynicism, but we all need to end up being very careful. This is a country that all of us want to bequeath to our children and grandchildren, and preserve a lot of the traditions, change some of the traditions, obviously, but there are a lot of things that we need to keep an eye on, because it'd be very easy to lose control of our country, or turning into a country of intolerance instead of tolerance. But I hear a lot of that nonsense with against minority groups and so on, and I know your listeners are not part of that, but they do know that there are people like that out there that are highly intolerant, and it's unfortunate.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you bring that up because, you know, you are known for having a very diverse department. You've hired more women, people with alternative lifestyles. It's all based on merit, and really commendable. The person running against you doesn't exactly share those views.
Well, we hear that frequently, and so I'm sure that ultimately, and regardless of what's being told out there, I think the voters will make an informed decision, and so we'll see what happens on Tuesday on that. And there's always a lot at stake in those elections, and so I know you've been encouraging your voters to go out and exercise their right to vote. I mean, this is one of the few countries where we really determine our course and scope of what we're going to do as not only a city and a Riverside County and as a state of California, but as a nation. It's all of us collectively working together. But unfortunately, there are some people that kind of cop out on that and don't exercise that right to vote, and yet you'll hear people complaining. And it's difficult to make a complaint if you're not also exercising your right to vote. And that was a hard fought, going back to our veterans background. That right to vote and the ability to do that in this country, our free country, is really incumbent upon all those things that those veterans in many cases laid down their lives on and defended this country and its traditions and its freedoms that sometimes we often take for granted. So I know none of your listeners do that, and they're going to exercise their right to vote, and regardless of whether they support me or some other candidate, it is important that you end up casting that vote, as there's a lot at stake, particularly in Riverside County and really across our great nation.
Well, well said, and I encourage all our listeners to get out and vote for you, Sheriff Stan Sniff. And I definitely know that you refuse to play politics with public safety. One of the major things is your opponent likes to say, like, we could give out concealed weapons permits in one day, which I think is very dangerous.
Well, it's impractical, and our technical staff have tried warning people that talk like that's nonsense. But unfortunately, at election time, at peaks, there's a lot of nonsense that passes off as some form of intelligent thought or argument, and that's one of the byproducts of having a free country. But the reality is, it's really incumbent upon the voter to actually dig a little bit into that and separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
Well, excellent. I think one of the things, too, is you are known for standing up for the public. Even if it's difficult, even if it's not popular, you stand up for the public and, you don't get pushed around. I think is a good way to say that.
Well, part of that is the drama of being a sheriff, which is in California. Both the sheriff and the DA are constitutional officers. And so I get often asked questions about, well, who do you work for, Stan, as a sheriff? And the answer is I'm really working on behalf of all your listeners. All 2.4 million that live inside Riverside County, that's who I answer to. And so I don't have the power of the purse. That's in the hands of the Board of Supervisors. But it's really important for the sheriff and the DA, for those that they're working for, all 2.4 million in our county's case, to end up having a voice in how money, and obviously money is always very scarce. There's never enough of it, public money we're talking about. And so without us saying something, it leads to an easy defense that, well, the sheriff never said anything, but it also causes me sometimes to end up chafing some people that need to hear something but maybe don't want to hear that what you have to say candidly. But it's important for each of us that are in that public arena to voice our opinion as public safety professionals to the board. It's ultimately their decision and part of our checks and balances that they allocate X amount of dollars to each of the departments, including the sheriff. But it does not work unless we voice input into that decision process. And I take great pride that sometimes people have to hear what they maybe not want to hear and would rather hear something else, but it is important for them to get the right information to make their decision. Once that decision is made by the Board of Supervisors in our case, then it's my job and my manager's job to execute that decision. When they say, Stan, this is the amount of money you're going to have in your tin cup for this next fiscal year that starts on July 1, I can have input and make noise going into it, utilize a bully pulpit to go over to the public directly that I work for. But in the end, when they make that decision, it's my job to execute that decision and stay within my budget, even if we're downsizing, which has been pretty painful. But that's my role of the managers, is to keep my budget in balance and do a good job of managing the resources that I'm allocated. And that's what we've done, and I'm very, very proud of that, and the managers that work under me.
Well, I definitely commend you in such a difficult time with lowered budgets, and you've been able to lower the crime rate significantly. So very incredible.
Great. Well, like I mentioned, there's a big new jail that is going to add a lot of hiring positions coming up this next spring. It'll add a huge number of beds to our county jail, which for anybody been following what's been going on in Riverside County for decades, we clearly need that new jail. A lot of it came from grant funding from the state of California, about $100 million. But that new jail that now will total about $341 million will be one of the most modern jails. And for your listeners, what's really important about that for them, because it sounds like a heck of a lot of money, and it certainly is those jails, our county jails in California, after realignment was passed in 2011, they have a critical new role. And I think many of your listeners will agree with that. And that's to help people so that they don't re-enter the criminal justice system that want to be helped. And so that means substance abuse, life skills, anger management, all those things that we do, in addition to mental health and medical services and so on, to do the best we can so that people don't go back and forth, what we call recidivism, back and forth into the criminal justice system. That new jail is the first of a generation of new jails, instead of just locking people up and throwing away the key, that actually tries to help people. And so I know a lot of your listeners that'll resonate with them. There are certain elements out there that I get that don't want to end up spending any dime, but there's a lot of great human beings that I think we can do a better job than spending endless amounts of money and cycling them in over and over and over again into our county jails and into our state prisons. And we owe it to do the best we can. Obviously, some may not take that, but I think we'll have a lot of positive impact on a lot of human beings.
Well, great news. And I think right now we're going to get back to some music with DJ Hano. And then if it's all right, we'll talk with you in another 10 or 15 minutes, discuss some more things going on in Riverside County, and some more information about the election, which is coming up in 2 days. All right, we've got DJ Hano live in the mix. I'm Fred Plumley. This is your music team 2018 midterm election event.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, K292 FQ Riverside, and K293 CF Moreno Valley.
You're live in a mix with DJ Hano.
Let's go.
All right, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the law offices of Schaefer Cormel. You need an experienced attorney to provide the best defense. Just because you are being charged or accused of a crime or traffic offense does not mean that you don't have options to avoid an unjust result. Whether being accused of a felony or misdemeanor, have Schaefer Cormel, an experienced and knowledgeable attorney, defend your rights in order to avoid any unjust consequences. With the offices throughout Southern California, the law offices of Schaefer Cormel goes to great lengths to provide individual client attention. Check it out. The law offices of Schaefer Cormel represents individuals throughout California with a focus on Southern California regions. AVVO Client Choice Award and AVVO Superb 10.0 rating. Doesn't get higher than that. Member, California Public Defenders Association, California Attorneys for Criminal Justice, and California DUI Lawyers Association. And Schaefer Cormel served as Judge Pro Tem for Riverside County Superior Courts for 10 years. Give them a call, 760-922-5051. The website, www.schaefercormel.com. Get the best legal defense. Contact the law offices of Schaefer Cormel, serving all of Southern California, 760-922-5051, www.schaefercormel.com. DJ Hano rocking the house tonight. What an exciting night. Just a few minutes, we'll be back with Sheriff Stan Snev, Riverside County Sheriff Coroner. Wow, DJ Hano rocking the house tonight at a great night. Your music team 2018 midterm election event. I'm Fred Plumley, and having a great conversation tonight with special guest Sheriff Stan Sniff, Riverside County Sheriff and Coroner, and always a pleasure having you here, Stan.
It's always fun to be with you guys. Rocking the house.
Yeah, definitely, and look forward to having you back. Maybe we could talk about, getting some more people into the Sheriff's Department and recruiting. That would be fun.
Oh, that would be awesome. And we're going to need a lot of heavy lift from a lot of our friends out in the community, including you guys, Fred, to end up helping get people steered in that direction. We only hire, and typically on the deputies, 1 out of 100. You've heard me say that number of applicants. A lot of people want those jobs, but we really need some interest from good men and women to fill a lot of those billets that we're going to have available and funded.
Well, great, and congratulations. I know a lot of people in the law enforcement community, and everybody wants to serve in Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Congratulations.
Well, we get a few every once in a while, and it's normal to want to change patches and uniforms. And I did the same thing. I originally was on a small police department and followed the lure of a large department. And one of the things that I was going to mention earlier is, and I'm not typical or atypical of somebody that's come up in the law enforcement career. In fact, your listeners would probably laugh because my family was involved in the Dayton citrus farming business out in the Coachella Valley at the turn of the last century. They were pioneers in that. So I had no predisposition whatsoever to go into law enforcement. But like probably some of your listeners, you're interested in a ride-along or to go out and ride with a patrol officer, and finally you end up, or you had a friend that talked you into it. Like in my case, I'd met in the military, but I was hooked from the first time with the adrenaline surges. And I never went into this job thinking I was going to do it as a career. I was in my 20s. I wanted to do something adventuresome, and it was exciting when I went on the ride-along. And my dad was finding that I was riding every night and sleeping during the day instead of working on the family farm, and then kind of teased me about it. And I went to work full time. But from the police department, I went to the sheriff's department out in the Coachella Valley. I stayed in patrol operations for quite a while, even though I described there's other functions the sheriff is responsible for. And as I grew in rank in the organization, I got moved all over the county. Went to Riverside to work for the great Sheriff Coyce Bird as a lieutenant. Learned a lot about the western end of Riverside County. Went out to Temecula for 2 years as the night watch commander. Back up into Riverside out of the patrol operations. In the command of jail. Command of the Banning Sheriff's Office, patrol station as a captain. Command of the training center we talked about, which is a very different sort of job. And then last probably 2 decades now, I've been either a chief deputy or assistant sheriff or the sheriff. So I've been in a series of executive positions that got me well grounded in budgeting and dealing with the county government and also the other allied agencies we work with. So I wouldn't say I'm typical or atypical, but some of those areas I talked about on patrol, jail operations, court operations, and coroner operations, most of us, just like the armed forces, crisscross through a variety of those different staff and command assignments as we grow up in the organization. But the biggest issue is, like the military, you're going to end up moving geographically. Instead of all over the globe like you do in the military, it's in the confines of Riverside County, which is a big county. But lots of great opportunities if you're willing to do that and serve in different areas of the county, or to serve only in one area, serve in multiple different specialties, or only one. There's no reason to ever be bored in a sheriff's department.
Outstanding. It looks like you've had experience in all the different facets of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, unlike your opponent. I'd like to ask you, what are your priorities when you are reelected this coming Tuesday?
Well, it's interesting because I work those out just not unilaterally necessarily, but in conjunction with county government, the fiscal officers, and the representatives of the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors individually as well. I get to share a lot of things back and forth in the discussions. But the first priority is to end up hiring those positions that I mentioned earlier for the new John Benoit Detention Center, the massive new jail that'll be ready to occupy sometime next spring that we desperately need in this county. Part of that growth has caused our jails to be way, way, way too undersized. So that's the heaviest push that we've got is to we spend a lot of money on bricks and mortar, but you can't put those jails in operation without the staff to actually fly those huge structures and make them run. So that's a priority. The second priority is to rebuild some of the lost strength that we had in the unincorporated areas. And again, those are the areas that I'm responsible for crime investigations outside the 28 cities that make up Riverside County. So whether it's mountaintops or remote desert areas, as I mentioned, there's about 400,000 people that live outside the cities in Riverside County. And so my responsibility is to get a few more patrol deputies out there, where we had to cut a lot of them due to the budget cuts over the last couple of years. And then the last priority is during the tough budget times, we had to make some really tough decisions. And so unfortunately, we had to back out of support in officers and deputies and sergeants that were dealing with a lot of these regional teams and task forces. And those are all very critical to the public, because the Sheriff's Department has the heavy lift capability, working side by side with 11 separate city police departments and the Highway Patrol for every area to end up having these regional teams and task forces, whether it be gangs or drugs or counterterrorism. There's a host of these that we deal with on our massive department size, but none of the individual agencies can do anything without having the Sheriff's Office be a partner. And unfortunately, those budget cuts really drove our staffing back, where we were having a difficult time in the county areas on just handling our basic blocking and tackling, calls for service or calls for help from the public, if you will. And we really need, as their third point, is we really need to put our officers and sergeants back in those teams that we temporarily had to back out of to accommodate the budget cuts. So those are the three priorities that we've got, and those are not just mine unilaterally. As I said, we've worked that out with county government. Everybody's in a match on that, and thank goodness we've got enough additional funding now. County's still got a lot of fiscal challenges, but your Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and the DA for that matter, actually got bumped up on funding that we desperately needed. So we're very, very thankful to the Riverside County Board of Supervisors, because it was not an easy thing when their piggy banks are pretty dry right now, to end up finding additional dollars for us to do what we need to do to protect the public.
Well, congratulations and great priorities and outstanding. I have another question. How did this campaign start? Obviously, it's been a very difficult campaign, but what's the background on that, Stan?
Well, for those of your listeners that live in western Riverside County, the Press Enterprise did a pretty good job over the last couple of years. It really started with a union head of one of the many unions that we have in the county, and one of several that I've got. And every once in a while, we get people that think they're a little bit more important than they are, and want to dictate public policy issues to the Sheriff's Department. And of course, that's not how the law operates, and there's no organization that can end up being dictated to like that and function. And I think it was more somebody that had a swelled head and thought they were the same or co-equal of the sheriff, but it doesn't work that way in government. And there's an organization when you have multiple bosses like that can function. And so I had to, like in many cases, had to listen to what they had to say and then tell them no. And the critical issue that your listeners will be fascinated by, it was dealing with body cameras, police body cameras. And those have been a thing that my own deputies, members of that same union, wanted. And they turned their back on their union leader, who was just being power mad, basically. And the department had told him no. And he's now since retired, but he was the architect of all that money, and basically as a revenge thing to knock the sheriff out for basically telling him no. The good thing for your listeners and members of Riverside County, we've now fielded 1,000 body cameras to our patrol operations all across Riverside County. Thankfully, we got a great grant. We put up some matching dollars out of our asset forfeiture funds, and about $600,000 came from the federal government. We've now outfitted all our patrol operations. The deputies themselves, even though their union fought tooth and nail and sued me and the Board of Supervisors, it's all part of being in government, making tough decisions. But even though we were sued, we prevailed, and those body cameras were deployed. And like I mentioned, the deputies themselves in that union wanted those body cameras. So sometimes you'll hear that the officers don't want them. That's not true. The officers like those body cameras, and they're certainly help on lawsuits and payouts that we have on county taxpayer dollars on some of the stuff that we get sued on. And they've been a really great boon, and they really help professionalize our force even more. There's some other issues too, but basically this all generated a campaign of revenge to pay back for being told no and not being able to run the department. Unfortunately, that doesn't work to have a union leader, even though they may have a huge ego, to end up running our agency. Mine has 4 different unions, so you can see that the mathematics on that just doesn't work.
You know, great information. I think everyone's learned a lot. And, you know, the body camera issue, I know quite a number of your deputies, and they all like it. In fact, I think it protects the officer because there's a record. Most of the time, you know, the people they're interacting with or the perpetrators are the ones that are doing stuff that are captured on video.
Oh, absolutely. And like I mentioned a couple of times, the deputies themselves wanted those cameras. They wanted to voluntarily test them. They wanted to have input in the process. And they quite literally, and I was very proud of them, when they were told by this same union leader, don't wear those cameras, et cetera, almost like 99% of them, which is an overwhelming majority, simply turned their back and disobeyed their union on that. And thankfully that was good because we got a lot of great input from the actual men and women on the streets that have to wear those devices. We made some changes. The manufacturer made changes, and they've been a great device. And I heard over and over from the officers they were very, very thankful the department thought enough of them to give them those devices, and they played a great role not only in solving investigations, but also dumping spurious complaints that are really just made for revenge against the individual officers. I think your listeners could understand it's amazing how people change their attitude when you tell them they're on the camera.
No, it's great. And, you know, one of the things that I want to mention is integrity. You know, I really admire you and your work because you are a straight shooter and you tell people the truth. Now, you have an opponent who, well, doesn't like to do that. In fact, he goes around now saying that he's lieutenant sheriff, and I don't believe that job description exists in your department, right?
No, there's no such animal, and although when he ran before, he had the job title in 2014 exactly correct, for some strange reason, probably for political reasons from his handlers, spending a lot of money, they wanted to boost up his credentials or pedigree, and so they generated this almost like a lieutenant general, this image of a lieutenant sheriff, but there's no such animal on it. It's really quite misleading and doesn't demonstrate a lot of integrity on it. It was challenged, didn't want to end up changing it, and it is what it is, but we've had a lot of fun with it on basically being some more of this nonsense. He also ended up indicating a lot, if you'll recall, also very misleading to the public, that all these cops and all these agencies are supporting him. That's just pure bunk. It's a handful of leaders. Most of the members of any of these organizations never had any input whatsoever, including the spending of their money. So it's nonsense that he's supported by all the law enforcement community and police chiefs and so on, because that's absolutely false. But in politics, you can advertise anything I guess you want, even if it's not remotely true on that, but it doesn't speak well for the integrity of a campaign or somebody that wants to be a chief law enforcement officer that's going to impact a lot, each of your lives to end up doing that type of stuff. The other thing, too, I'll mention that goes along with that is your sheriff's department in Riverside County, just like other agencies, we take very critical that we end up holding our employees accountable and that we're transparent. And one of the things that we've done and will continue to do while I'm in office is when we have officers or other staff that are involved in misconduct, we end up, sometimes including termination, we end up holding them accountable, and they are disciplined. And the union, this particular union leader didn't like that, and they don't like us to end up disciplining any officers. And I appreciate they've got a responsibility to defend their members and so on, but it is absolutely critical that your listeners understand that any of us running these law enforcement agencies, of people wearing guns, exercising impact on constitutional rights and so on, that we hold them accountable. And I can underscore that in our department, like the other agencies, the overwhelming majority of officers do a great job day in and day out, and they adhere to the rules and the law. But sometimes, as your listeners might recognize, we get people in our midst that don't belong there, and it's my legal and moral responsibility to weed them out. And if they need to be separated from the law enforcement community because they're not a good fit for us, then that's what we need to do. And those are not easy decisions, but that's all of trying to run an organization and being an adult in life. You have to take care of your employees by also issuing out those disciplines when they do misconduct.
Outstanding, Stan, and I really commend your professionalism. And this integrity issue is important. Your opponent also has these bloggers going out and attacking everyone in a very negative way. And I believe it's called the Right On Daily blog.
I hate to even name it because it's a disgusting creation. And in politics, when you don't have anything really cogent or valid to say, you just make stuff up and see if it sticks on the wall. And that's been unfortunate. And I think the really sad thing that we were talking about during one of the breaks is, and you've seen it up close and personal, Fred, but that has been used as an attack weapon on wonderful people in the community, and also great men and women inside the sheriff's department is divided by attacking them, and it's just made up garbage, like a slime machine, basically, to frighten them so they don't say anything or they stay back in the shadows. And it's a terrible way to treat other human beings, and it's been an embarrassing part that people carrying badges would act like that in our department. And some of them retired, some of them have been disciplined by us and have various axes to grind. But it's been sad the damage it's done to other good human beings in our department and out in our communities.
Outstanding, Stan. We are just about out of time. I want to recommend that everyone get out and vote. It's very important. And Stan, would you like to have the last word before we go off the air tonight?
Well, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, each of you can take a great deal of pride. I certainly do every day, and following the men and women that doing their jobs throughout all our different communities across our great county. And I hope that you'll continue to support and humbly ask for your vote on Tuesday, or if you're already getting ready to mail it in before then. Continue the great work that we've been doing for the last 11 years, the great changes we made in bringing about our department and bringing in more technology to make us more cost effective. And you hit upon the other one. The big issue to me has been integrity for a long time, and we're going to continue to push that. That is a mainstay in your Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and I hope all of you support all those that end up serving in our communities.
All right, well, thank you very much, Sheriff Stan Sniv, Riverside County Sheriff and Coroner since 2007. I'm Fred Plumley. This is NBC Radio, KCAA, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. And your music team is a Fred Plumley production. Good night, everyone. We'll see you back next week. DJ Hano, live and in the mix. Good night, everyone.
KCAA Loma Linda. Listen on 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM.
It's time to make the Tri-City Cemetery